Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Raise the Vibe with Liz. I'm your host, Liz Peterson, and today I have Melisa Keenan with me. She's an intimacy coach that helps women receive pleasure without limits. She is a USA Today bestseller that helps you find more love, more connection, and more impact. And I'm thrilled to welcome Melisa to the show. Melisa, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So great to have you, Melisa. I would just want to dive right in because I love the work that you're doing. But take us back. What was your journey that led you to be doing this work?
Oh boy, that's always such a big question. I really came into this work from the School of Hard Knocks and, going through tremendous life experience. And I appreciate so much about the coaching industry that I can like lead from my heart in that way. I can share my story, where if I went, potentially like a therapist route or a higher education, etc., that I might not actually be able to like really utilize my powerful story in my work. But I come from a background of several generations of women who were extremely disempowered, men who were making really painful decisions for the women around them and their children. And I'm telling you, generation after generation, every story that I know contains sexual abuse, trauma, abuse, infidelity, betrayal, addiction. It is just laden. And so, being born into that, my family members saw me as sort of a savior. Like, this little girl is going to come in and she's going to save her parents and she's going to be the best of all of us. And there was just this intense by my grandpa and his relatives, there was this intense pressure of like, never do drugs, never do this, don't do any of that, don't touch this and that and everything, like just like trying so hard to convey the life lessons and areas where they felt like they had failed, to instill that in me before it was too late. And I absolutely took on the pressure. Like it was like, okay. But interestingly enough, my parents really struggled actually, and there was a lot of abuse and addiction, and as well as infidelity and betrayal in our home. And ultimately, my dad died of cancer when I was 12, which was a huge devastation and loss to me. And just prior to that, my mom had discovered, his infidelity and more details around his challenges, and they had divorced. And she was in total PTSD and in a state where she was unable to care for me. So I went and was shipped off to live with my aunt and uncle. So you can hear like trauma, 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 all throughout my upbringing. And I found this beautiful belief in family when I turned 18. I had thought I wouldn't have a family, but because of a church that I joined and the faith that I joined, I gained a new, renewed sense of like, maybe it is possible for me to have a happy family life and create that given some different tools. And so I married very young and married this man who was all shiny and had just come back from a 2-year mission serving people in Bolivia, in like the poorest of poor places of the earth, and was like, okay, all right, this is a perfect setup for perfection. We started having children right away, despite the fact that we were still taking ourselves through college. But 5 years into our marriage, my husband let me know that he had had a secret addiction,
Mhm.
that actually had probably existed since he was around 9. Sexual in nature, pornography, that kind of thing. And I was devastated. At first, I was like, okay, we can do this. But the more time went on and I realized what this had meant for me, I realized that it meant that there were years of lies and deceit around where he was, what he was doing, as well as like his intentions with the most intimate parts of our relationship. And it was devastating. And that actually, I asked him to move out in 2013. That was the beginning of my awakening. So my husband and I ultimately did move back in together, and gosh, another 2.5 to 3 years later, finally we're like, you know what? This is going to work. And we did do this. And that's when I was like, oh, I need to help women. Women need to know. I have found so much like liberation and then connection in my marriage. It was like a whole different sense. And I'm so grateful I made that choice, because since opening my business, and as you will know too, as a business owner, it's like as you lead people, you continue to heal more and more. And the layers have just continued to peel back around what is masculine and feminine energy. I had been in my masculine energy all that time due to the trauma and being in kind of that suffering and survival mentality. And what is true relationship? None of my family members could show me, because they were all addicted and suffering. So being able to build that, and the joy that that has brought me, led me to the place that I'm in now.
That's awesome, Melissa. Thank you for sharing so much about your story. And I want to go all the way back to the beginning where you're talking about those generations of disempowered women, because I really hear how you were able to liberate yourself, from that past trauma. So, and come to a place where you could come back together and have that connection again, I'm sure from a lot of self-work. So can you talk about your journey through your self-work and kind of looking within?
Yeah, it really is like some kind of miracle. And I think about um one instance in particular, which I actually wrote about in the Younger Self Letters, which was the USA Today bestseller, was a story of a time that I actually was 12 and I was abandoned in the desert by my mom, and I had to hitchhike back to my guardian's home, my aunt and uncle. And the I had to ride in the back seat of actually the bed of a pickup truck. And I remember so vividly the dismal feeling that I felt um, at that time, looking up at the blue sky, thinking, is this my life? Is this all there is for me? And to be able to like be who I am now and have like the quality of connection and beauty and depth in my life, and being able to serve people and the level that I do and all of that, I literally feel like if I could go back and, convey that chapter actually was me going back and like conveying to her that like your life is going to be something incredible. But yeah, not without lots of inner work. I think in the beginning of my adult journey and recognizing I had lots of healing to do, it came from, I always convey this like on a threshold, it came from this place of like survival and fixing, and I'm broken and something's wrong with me, and like let me just stick a drill in my back and like twist it as hard as I can to get everything, fixed in me, to perfect me. It actually was still that voice of pressure from my ancestors. When I would hear "you're a chain breaker," it both liberated and weighted me. And oftentimes I would get this image in my mind of my ancestors and all their chains, and it would just feel like they're just yanking me down as hard as possible, which I don't know if that was true, but it sure felt that way at the time. I mean, now I have a completely different relationship with my ancestors, even my deceased ancestors, than I did at that time. But I think that as much as that was terrible, it did pave the path for me to finally cross that threshold into like, oh, actually, I'm not broken. And I actually never have been. And there's actually never been anything to fix or prove or perform. I could just thrive. I could just like choose into this expansiveness that is me. I could just choose into my own desires. I could give myself some space for pleasure and enjoyment, like play, like all of these things on the thrival side of the
Right.
spectrum. And I would say though, as much as I can like love up on that younger version of myself who was trying so hard, like clawing with her teeth and her knuckles bloody to like get somewhere, like it was a stepping stone. I think it was necessary, but the progress once I entered into the awareness that like actually this is not about brokenness. This is about just expansion, and I am like just whole as I am, made all the difference in the world.
I
That
love.
side of progress is so much more expansive and fast than the survival side of progress.
And I think what you said right there is key. I am all right just as I am right now in my expansion, because we do come from these places, the wounded feminine, from our ancestral line, disempowered women also in my family, and then stepping into that cultural feminine where we're constantly in our masculine energy, being able to do the work and accept ourselves like where we are, I think is an important part of the journey.
So huge.
Yeah. So going into, what you were talking about that divine energy and finding acceptance with yourself, let's step into the divine feminine. You were saying before, we started that you just wrote up something on social media about this. So let's go ahead and jump into that.
So in my business journey, it's been 5 years, and I was reflecting on the first year that I decided I was going to make six figures in my business, and all the ways that it felt like the entire world was colliding against me, and I was pushing against like boulders and mountains to call in what I wanted to call in. And the six figures represented wealth for me and my family, but it also represented impact and scaling and actually making a bigger difference on the planet, right? So certainly there may have been some shadow reasons like the proving and all that still woven in there, but there was a lot of really good light reasons as well. And I couldn't understand why so many circumstances came to like sort of hedge up the way, if you will, for my path. Um, for example, and I list several examples in my article, but one example is that I not only was I like riddled with anxiety and I was having trouble hiring a team and all these different things, I also got a severe physical health situation. I went into tremendous pain, and I went into the ER, and it was like test after test after test. And ultimately, they determined that I had a huge mass on my left ovary, of all places. So, like, this is the work I do. And if you know anything about energy, your left side is your feminine side, and your ovaries are obviously super connected to your feminine lineage and being a woman and all the things and your creative power and all of that, right?
Mhm.
Add to that the fact that I help women heal around sexuality and intimacy. So I'm like sacral chakra. That's like everything. I was like, what the heck? Why is my body telling me you need to do more healing on all this stuff that is literally the work that I do? Um, I felt like this is so hard. Um, and so two things sort of came through that experience. One was I had a really sacred experience where my late grandmother came to me, and she was almost confrontational. It's not unusual since my father died when I was 12. That really like opened the veil for me. And it's not unusual for me to have experiences where I feel my ancestors and I can communicate with them and etc. And that's just kind of developed as a normal part of my life. I kind of like once I started doing this work, I realized, oh, that's not normal for everyone. That's just me. It's just a handful of us, right? Um, but my grandmother came to me and almost confrontational. She's one that I had never called in because I carried so much anger for the way that she handled her life's circumstances. And because there are still family members alive and involved and et cetera, I won't go into the details of what that is, but I didn't feel that she protected and defended those that she had stewardship over, and that affected and rippled out to so many, including affecting me. And um and she came to me and was so like wailing and like, I am so sorry. And I felt like, you shouldn't be apologizing to me. There are other people who were far more like closely affected, but I was the one listening. I was listening because I was sitting still doing all this like natural healing remedies and meditations for this tumor on my ovary. And so I'm sitting there and I'm with her, and she shares all the circumstances in her life that led her to making the choices that she made. And she said, this is not an excuse, but it is my reality. It was my reality. And if I could go back and change it, I would. And then she said, you not forgiving me is holding me back in my progress. Out of all the family members on the earth still today, your anger is the thing, and begged for my forgiveness. And it was just like, for the first time, I really saw, instead of being angry at my ancestors for like the circumstances that they like plunked me into in this life, I was like, oh my gosh, like I could really feel that as crappy of a job as she did the best with what she had. She couldn't see any other perspective. And the forgiveness flowed. And then I realized that tumor was there. It was all the anger that I held towards not just her, but a lot of other members of my feminine lineage. When we talk about breaking the chains of our ancestry,
Mhm.
we have to really reconcile that that's with their behavior and like the like literal pieces they put into our DNA, that we're now battling, but it's not a war against them themselves, and how important that our hearts are actually like knit in love towards them. It came through so strong for me. And then not only was that tied to my health, but it was tied to my wealth and my whole goal around calling in six figures. It was like, as long as I hold on to all this stuff, it's just going to feel like molasses trudging up a hill to step into greater levels of expansion in myself.
Right. And what a beautiful example from your grandmother to be able to see where you're holding those things in your own body and what that's creating within yourself. Because so often when we have these emotionals or these emotional experiences or past traumas, we manifest them in our body in specific ways, like your ovary, right? And no doubt that it being on the feminine side is directly related to what you were talking about. That's fantastic.
And to wrap that story up, it didn't heal my ovary. As a matter of fact, I did have to go in and get surgery and have the tumor removed. They weren't sure if it was a cyst or a tumor or a cancerous tumor. So it was like multiple layers there. And they uncovered, it was a tumor, but they were actually able to separate it from my ovary, which initially they were like, there is no way. And I
Mhm.
count that as an absolute, like, oh, my angels were in there, like, you know what, you do need to get this thing out, but like, we'll help you out. We'll let you keep your ovary. That meant a lot to me at that time, and so that was a really beautiful like wrap up to a very scary situation.
That is beautiful. And it's such a gift. And we do have to sometimes do the physical medical thing on top of the energetic piece,
Yeah.
right? Because it goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
It really does sometimes. It's kind of that holistic approach. Like, okay, I've had this experience and this is what my body did to kind of handle that experience. But, there's medical intervention that can also help me go through this process and process this out of my body.
Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. So diving into that divine feminine again, let's talk about, the culture around our divine feminine and this look that you have at what you call the cultural feminine.
Yeah, super important. And I can already tell by what you've shared, you have a really strong sense of these differences, which I find is rather rare right now. I kind of hear a lot of people talking about feminine energy in a damaging way, and I'm not here to say I'm the only one like saying it in an empowering way, but I do hear a lot of damaging messages. And I think that's important for people to realize that not everything, the problem is that we begin to learn about this, but we only can learn about it with masculine lenses because that's all we've known. So it takes a lot to drop those lenses and go, oh wait, maybe this isn't something I can measure or control or quantify. Maybe it's something different entirely. And can I like step into a being sense around what my feminine energy is, etc. So I break down the feminine into three different categories. The first is cultural feminine, the second is feminine or yin energy, and then the third is divine feminine. And you could do the same with the masculine side for those three as well, but we'll just focus on the feminine to keep it clear. Cultural feminine is different varying on whatever your particular culture is, which includes, so many aspects of our upbringing, our parentage, the people that raised us, even the influences from media and social media and etc. that we even experience today. So for example, I have my nails done, and I like having my nails done, and I don't think it really has much to do with anything with my feminine anything. I do it because I like it, right? But there is in my culture sort of like oh, that's a feminine thing to do. That would be an example of cultural feminine. In the 50s, when we think of cultural feminine, we think of like a housewife that's subservient, that constantly has a vacuum and an apron and only deals with the children and brings her husband his slippers every night when he walks in the door. Unfortunately, pieces and threads of that kind of stuff have filtered into this discussion around feminine energy and divine feminine, when really they're mostly separate. There can be some overlap. For example, I might also do my nails because I like beauty, and beauty is a value in feminine energy that, masculine energy isn't necessarily concerned with. Feminine energy is. So there is some overlap, and that's where it starts to look like a twisted up rope that we really need to parse apart and pull apart and see the differences, because pieces of our cultural feminine typically are holding us back. So what I usually say to clients is, you need to ask yourself, what have I believed it meant to be a air quotes good woman? Good woman used very intentionally because there's a lot of polarity around good, right? A good woman, even a good girl. And like to just take a moment, like bullet that out, list those out, and then go into your wisdom and go, is that actually the kind of woman that I want to be? Does that represent the values that I want to have as a woman that I now am? So I think that's extremely important. Um, and then we kind of have this fourth piece around feminist, right? Where we end up seeing more masculine energy culture coming in. And so again, list out those things too. Like, I believe that women need to be strong and independent and never need anyone. That could be an example of a cultural feminine or feminist perspective. And again, like, is that who I want to be? Is that serving me? Does that create outcomes I like in my life? So when you look at cultural feminine and kind of like, okay, now let's set that aside. Let's now look at feminine energy and divine feminine. Feminine energy, or yin, is that polar opposite and also like related to yang and masculine energy, and those correlate and co-create with each other at any given time. In any body, we have masculine and feminine, yin and yang energy. So you could see why this gets so confusing, right? There's so many uses of feminine, and it's like, well, which one are you even talking about when you're telling me that this is what I need to do when I'm dating, or this is what I need to do when I'm manifesting, or this is like, right? Like all these feminine things are out there, and it's like, what do you actually mean by that? Feminine energy is focused on being as opposed to doing. It's flow as opposed to structure. It's going inward as opposed to looking outward. It's sensing as opposed to going based on knowledge and fact. It's it's intuition. It's maybe some of the more softer or subtler pieces of life, or the nuance, or the spaces in between. That's what feminine energy is. And what we find is that because of our culture, typically a lot of women are out of balance in masculine energy. And these pieces that I just listed, like softness, tenderness, like flow, going inward, all sound kind of weak or even scary, maybe even terrifying. So you could see where in a person we've lost some of the parts of ourselves. So what I would say to that is any part of teaching that you receive around masculine and feminine energy, you need to ask, is it asking me to embody more of myself, or is it asking me to sacrifice parts of myself? If it's asking you to sacrifice or remove parts of yourself to fit into a mold, then it's probably based in only half truths.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe not the kind of advice you want to be taking in. You want the ones that are asking you to embody all parts of your being. And that leads into the third definition, which is the divine feminine, which is where we are embodied in the fullest version of ourselves. We are divine, if you will. And whatever that means, it means different things to different people. Maybe it's a wholeness. Maybe it really is a connection with God. Maybe it is your God self.
Awesome. What a great description. Thank you for doing that. And it's so beautiful these days how we're stepping into these new ways of being, these new paradigms, and kind of leaving the old ones behind, because my lineage, very much the 1950s. My mom used to brag about meeting her husband at the door with a drink. I grew up, dad was working 9 to 5, had a second job after dinner. She'd have dinner already. I mimicked the same thing, in my 20-year marriage. But now, post being able to recreate myself, not having to be in that masculine, go, 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 do everything, be independent, more of partnerships and cooperations and communication and that sort of thing. And being able to hold both sides of myself, where I'm able to be in a flow and be creative and not put so much pressure on myself to do, even though that does creep in every now and then, because it's really hard to like step away from those programs, where we're very much a high functioning society. So coming out of that and being like, okay, what I did today is enough, you know?
Yes, absolutely. And recognizing how much of that actually is a co-creation with our culture and with the collective consciousness that surrounds us, is so empowering. That was something I really resisted because I thought it would be disempowering to give any power to like something outside of me that I don't have control over. Felt like, well, no, like it has to be all up to me. If it's got to be, it's up to me, right? And that again comes from that masculine energy, drive that we're plunged into. But it's all a co-creation. So even me, even like knowing all I know and teaching this and supporting transformation all the time with this, I wake up in the morning and I can feel the collective consciousness almost every day. It's like maybe a couple times a month that I wake up and I don't feel it. I
Mm-hmm.
feel that pressure to do, to prove, to hustle. What have you done? What do you have to show for yourself? Like, you're not enough, do more. Like just all of that. And I get to go, oh yeah, that's right. There's that. So I strategically surround myself in places and spaces and even coach people so that I remember like, oh yeah, no, there's so much more to life than that. But it really does take an unplugging and a plugging into the places and spaces that we want to be plugged into.
God, that's so true. And how could you help your clients to unplug from that and get into a flow and know that it's okay to just go with your own creativity?
There's two pieces because I kind of look at the piece about like our external and then the piece about our internal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so important that we acknowledge that external and we do consciously choose to unplug. And sometimes I even, am like, look, you need to declare war. not with people, but with principles and powers and things that exist that you can't see. And so that when you hear that voice that says your butt is flabby and you better get on the treadmill, like you can say, no, this is war. I am not listening to that. I'm not going to let that fuel a domino effect of choices that now influence, my stress eating, and then, my crazy workout routines, and then overcommitting to stuff that I don't really want to do. And then the failure and the shame cycle that comes with that. I am declaring war. No. Which is fun, right? That's an aspect of the divine feminine in us that has culturally not necessarily been as welcome. The
Mhm.
fire that we have, the power, the like the roar, and that, can be synonymous with mama bear. Mama bear maybe is a little bit more culturally acceptable, if you will.
Mhm. Yes.
We need to bring that mama bear out for us against all that external stuff. And then on the inside, we need to create intimacy with ourselves. So this is where the intimacy piece really comes in. It's into me see. So we tap in with, okay, those are all the stories, and those are actually not even mine, even though they're coming from my brain. They're not mine. They're like programs that are existing. Now I can separate from that and go, what am I feeling? How does that feel in my body from the neck down? And then what are these feelings like guiding me towards? Our feelings are actually a compass leading us towards what we deeply value. So it's like, oh, what values are either missing for me or calling to me? What does my heart really desire? And we use that whole concoction of feelings and desires and values to layer by layer build trust in yourself, that you don't actually have to listen to the voices externally, that the wisdom is all within you. And it begins to create this like fulfillment. It's almost like a formula, this path of pleasure and desire and values that leads us to a place of greater freedom.
And for a woman, it's so important to have that pleasure in life, that creativity in life. It's very much part of that divine feminine.
Absolutely.
Mhm. And I
Women,
love what you said, into me, I see,
yeah.
for intimacy, being able to look within and really find those places within yourself, for yourself. It's not really all the time about intimacy about other, intimacy within yourself as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And people don't really think, like, what is that? But we really aren't able to create that closeness and connection with others any deeper than we've been willing to go within ourselves. And we're
Mhm.
not we're not able to see them at a deeper level, and we're not able to allow others to see deeper into us either. So it really behooves us to go inward and create that inside if we want to create that in our relationships.
Nice. I love that. And then you also help people dive into finding their birthright of pleasure. And this isn't just sexual pleasure. Of course, it transforms or transfers into sexual pleasure, but finding the pleasure in life, which I also think is very important, for women, especially these days.
Absolutely. My own journey with that was so difficult, because when you have a lot of trauma and you find yourself in a, constant pattern of survival and suffering, there doesn't seem to be a lot of space for that, nor a lot of permission for that, or maybe even no worthiness for that. Like, I actually believed it wasn't for me. I wasn't supposed to, I wasn't allowed to, and even if I was, it was bad. There were so many layers to my experience, of reclaiming that pleasure. So bringing in space just to experience pleasure involved healing an eating disorder. It involved, doing yoga, and like I became yoga teacher certified because I didn't really know how to be in my body. So just even becoming aware of pleasurable sensation, like taste, touch, smell, everything from the neck down, those sensations, and then that correlates to our intuition. Like, how else are we supposed to know stuff, it doesn't come to our brain. And very rarely do we hear a thunderous voice from God with our ears. It's very rare for people to have the audible, gift. So we sense it from the neck down. So what I was so shocked to discover is that as I allowed myself to begin to follow my pleasure, follow the things that excite me, follow the things that bring me joy, it also brought me more in tune with my intuition,
Mm-hmm.
and which, ultimately for me meant I was more in tune with God. Like it was like, oh, all this time I thought I had to shove myself into being in alignment with God, being in God's will, when really it's about figuring out what my will even is, so that then I can go, oh, okay, where is this missing a little bit? Where can this get even juicier and more pleasurable and more full? Because that's how I'm pretty sure God is living. Like, if you align with the God, or you believe there is a God up there, I'm pretty sure he's not suffering and in survival mode all the time. He or she. So that has been so massive. And certainly then that opens the door in an intimate partnership where you can start to tap into things like sex magic, or healing through sex, or
Mm-hmm.
manifesting through sex, or truly finding that deep connection with sex. Because anybody who's had sex knows there's a difference between sex that's robotic, and it may even be pleasurable, but it's robotic, versus sex that is deep and rich and meaningful and like life changing, right? So it really opens up that door to accessing kind of some of the more subtle, nuanced energy experiences that we can have with regards to sex.
Mm-hmm. And then that translates into the rest of our lives.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I always say, this is the part where, I mean, I typically work with business owners. And that's kind of a unique thing. Like, people often say, Melissa, you found a thing and you just made it up and then you just do it. That's kind of true about the work that I do, because I see that deep correlation between, I mean, it's common sense. If I'm feeling turned on in my relationships, I'm going to feel turned on as a visionary, as a business owner. I'm going to be able to, show up in that more expansive, heart open space.
Mm-hmm.
Where if I'm not experiencing all that in my relationship, it can be a lot more challenging to experience that in my business.
100%. Is there something that you could share with our listeners that would help them to be able to find that space more fully within themselves?
The pleasure space.
Yes.
Mm-mm-mm. Each of us start at such a different place in our journey, and that's why, another reason why I chose to go this coaching, mentoring route, because I don't want to be the one that sits here and gives you some formula that you then take and try and determine that there's something wrong with you because it didn't work, right? But with that said, it's kind of all the things that we've talked about so far. And I would say that if you find yourself going, yeah, actually, this whole conversation has been super triggering. Pleasure, definitely not part of my experience. Then just start by pondering on, can I have a little more pleasure in my life? And would that really be so bad? Like, maybe just start there if you're just taking that first baby step. Would that actually blow stuff up? I know that for me, again, because of my ancestors, and don't do anything that could create addiction, and don't look the wrong way, and don't this and don't that. My grandpa even told me, don't have children because this world is too scary. Like, there were just so many things that were like, okay, I am not here to enjoy. I am here to like be a warrior. But as I really began to listen to myself, it was like, oh, I don't actually find myself wanting to go sleep with 1,000 partners, or go try a bunch of crazy recreational drugs. No, you do that when you're hurting, not when you're actually calling in the true value of pleasure. It's very different. So
Mhm.
maybe you give yourself just a little inch here or there. Maybe it just starts with compassion. in the places and spaces where you're like, kicking yourself because you keep trying to change a habit, or you keep trying to create a goal or something, and you keep like feeling like you're self-sabotaging. I kind of hate this whole philosophy around self-sabotaging because it actually is so opposite. Again, it's that drill in the back to get stuff done. Maybe
Yeah.
if you find yourself in that space, you actually just go, you know what? Maybe I keep doing the same things because there's wisdom in me. So what value am I actually experiencing by doing the thing I keep saying I don't want to do? And is that beautiful? Like, can I actually celebrate what that thing is, what that represents, that action that I keep doing? Maybe it just starts there, just by giving yourself a little bit more grace and understanding.
And permission.
And, maybe if you're further along the path, it looks like turn the lights on when you're having sex. Like let use some drums or something. Do something that you've never done before. Try something new and to really unleash. Like see if you can actually access within yourself the part of you that feels completely unhidden. And what does that look like? What does she want to do?
Yeah, stepping into those vulnerable places where you're allowed, you're giving yourself permission, to be and do and feel the joy and the pleasure, without feeling judged. You're creating a safe space for yourself to be
Yes.
able to express yourself.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think, go
You
ahead.
can do that by yourself and you can do that with a partner. And, of course, that depends on your partnership and where you guys are at. But um, those moments, like when you really access that for the first time, those are like huge deposits on the side of thriving, right? Like you don't forget those.
No.
They sear in your mind just like trauma sears in your mind. It's like, oh, look at who I am. Oh my gosh, where did she come from?
And that helps you step more fully into yourself and become a more empowered being as well.
Yeah.
When you have those moments, it shows you like, yes, I can have these moments. This
Yes.
is okay. It is okay to shine my light and be who I am,
Yes.
and to thrive. I think that's important.
Absolutely.
Mhm. You also have a 4-step roadmap to getting more.
Yes. So this is the free intimacy guide, and you can find it on my website, www.melisakeenan.com. And this actually takes you through the process that I mentioned earlier around going into me see the feelings, the values. And it's really neat because it's probably a deeper exploration than maybe you've gone before. And then it helps you create a statement that you then have the option to share with someone that's like, really, okay, I did this inner excavation from my heart and soul. And now I'm going to take a chance and offer it to someone and potentially connect with someone or create intimacy with someone over what I discovered. So I highly recommend, hop in there. And of course, that brings you into my email list where I am a huge storyteller. If you didn't already know, if you're still hanging with us, then you see the value of stories and that, how they can activate truth in you. And I'm a huge storyteller in my email list. So it's a lot of fun.
Yes, I've enjoyed your emails. So
Oh,
I
awesome.
highly recommend people, get on our email list. Oh, and definitely download the 4-step roadmap to getting more. So, and that they can find on your website, melisakeenan.com, correct?
Yes.
Great. And I think, doing this work really liberates yourself, right? And it helps bring the collective out of those old paradigms, where women were so disempowered, where we are so disempowered in some areas in our lives, can help us transform those areas and to become a new and better version of ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Is there a jewel of wisdom that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Yes, I'll repeat something I already said, which is find the things that ask you to be more of you, not less of you. that you can pursue all the success, all of your heart's desires with all of yourself, and any parts of yourself that you feel like you have to sacrifice or get rid of or reject or hide away, those actually are working against you in creating what you want, not working for you, despite what the world would say. So again, find those places and spaces where you can just be fully called into all of you, calling in all parts of you. That's what the world is asking of you. And that's what will allow you to feel the most connected to your power.
I love that, Melissa. Allowing yourself to be vulnerable and to come out of the shadow and really shine as who you are and be authentic in your personal sovereignty. I love that. How can people work with you?
Yeah, so right now I am running a beautiful hybrid program called The Authentic Feminine. And that's for women, so you can work with me in group and one-on-one capacity. And we're also bringing in different experts who have different niches around divine feminine, as well as it takes you through your true identity as a woman, my signature program. And that is a beautiful space of, high achieving spiritual women who are out to get stuff done, but also want to do it with that wholeness and that fulfillment and integrity. And I also work with couples. And so I will work with a husband and wife in a 6-month container through a program I call the Soul of Your Marriage, into me see the soul of your marriage, and call in that kind of divine feminine, divine masculine grow together space.
Nice. And you also have started working with men as well, right? And being a mother of 4 boys, I think that work is really important as well.
I have, and I don't market as much to men. I guess mostly because I've already created this platform to women, but every once in a while, men will come in and creep in, and I work with them around the divine masculine. And it's so interesting because I think when they first hear that, it's like, oh, she's gonna tell me more about who I'm supposed to be, what I'm supposed to be doing. It's actually a very similar journey to what women are going through. It's like an unraveling and a rejection of so much of that stuff, because what your partner really wants in relationship is your heart, even though she might be showing you right now that she wants something else. She really just wants your heart. So I really help men to bring that forward and have more success in their relationships.
That's awesome. And one more time, how can people reach you?
Yeah, come to melisakeenan.com. You can also find my free Facebook group, Women Manifesting Intimacy, or find me on any of the social channels.
Awesome. Melissa, it's been a great conversation. Thank you so much for being a guest, and I really appreciate everything you brought to our listeners today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Liz.
And thank you everyone for joining us. Again, I'm Liz Peterson, and this is Raise the Vibe with Liz. And you can find me on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram at Raise the Vibe with Liz. And my website is liz'shealingtouch.com. Thank you everyone for joining us. And remember to get out there and raise the vibe. Have a great day, everybody. Bye.